Shalom. Are you from the tribe of Simeon? Are you descended from the Israelite tribe known as Simeon, or from one of the other tribes? We had 12 tribes of Israel. These 12 tribes of Israel divided into two separate sections. One section became the ancestors of the Jewish people. They were dominated by Judah. The second section became the 10 tribes which were taken away by the Assyrians, lost consciousness of their ancestry. They moved, they migrated, and they eventually converged in Western Europe. And that is where their descendants are to be found now, in Western Europe. So if you come from Western Europe, then the chances are that you too are descended from Israel. It's not absolutely certain. Other things come into play, other considerations come into play. But it's a beginning. It's a beginning, something to start with. And one of the things we can use to determine whether or not we are Israelite, or what the chances are, is how characteristics correspond with those with one or the other of the Israelite tribes. So we had 12 tribes of Israel. There's 12 tribes of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin. They were the 12 tribes of Israel. Simeon was the second son. First we had Reuben, then we had Simeon. Simeon was the second son, and his mother was Leah. Leah was the first wife of Jacob. Jacob was renamed Israel. And altogether he had four wives, and altogether he had 4 wives, from whom, that is 4 women, from whom he begat 12 sons. And the two main wives were Leah and Rachel. Rachel had a handmaiden, Bilhah, and Leah had a handmaiden, Zilpah, and Jacob begot children from his 2 wives, Rachel and Leah, and also from the handmaidens, Bilhah and Zilpah. So from Leah, Jacob begat 6 sons. And his first son was Reuben, and then his second son was Simeon. And he had Leah, and Leah was his main wife, was considered his main wife. But Jacob loved Rachel more, and Leah was upset about this. So first she bore him a son. First she bore him a son, Reuben. And then after that, she bore him a son, Simeon. And after that, another 4 sons. Altogether, Leah bore Jacob 6 sons. So Simeon was the second son. Before Simeon was born, it tells us in the Bible, Genesis 29, then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. She called his name Simeon. So she called his name Simeon, and the name Simeon in Hebrew connotes Shamar Oren. Listen, hear. That is, God has heard, listen, has heard on my affliction, my pain, my anguish. And this was the name given to Shimon. So someone with his name might be expected to be a person of a serious outlook on life, of a serious type of person, probably religious, possibly devout, at all events somewhat intense, and also having a potential to feel discriminated against, deprived. Yeah, this is just based on the name, but the names are often indicative. To be deprived in a sense. And this too is something fits what we know about the characteristics of Simeon, both as an individual, a forefather of the tribe, and in the personality, the tribal personality of his offspring. Now, when the Israelites came out of Egypt, like the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 sons of Jacob of Israel, they became 12 tribes. And the 12 tribes went down into Egypt, and in Egypt they were oppressed, and they came up under leadership of Moses out of Egypt, and they entered the land of Canaan, and they conquered it, and they divided it up amongst them. And Simeon received his portion in the south, to the south of Judah, and later they moved on a little bit. They moved somewhat more to the south, and then also to the east. But initially, their inheritance was to the south of Judah. Tribes were together, 12 tribes together in the land of Israel, under King Saul, and then under King David, and then under King Solomon. At the death of Solomon, they divided into two different sections. The northern section was known as the Kingdom of Israel. It was comprised of 10 tribes. The southern section was known as the Kingdom of Judah, and it comprised Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, most of Levi, and from Judah came the present-day Jewish people, or the core section, the central element, one could say, of the Jewish people came from the Kingdom of Judah. Meanwhile, we had Simeon to the south, and some assume that Simeon had been absorbed into Judah. Perhaps part of it may have. There were also elements from Simeon together with Judah. But most of Simeon remained separate, and even though it was in the south, it seems to have been under the sovereignty of the Kingdom of Israel to the north. In other words, you had the Kingdom of Israel in the north, the Kingdom of Judah, and then below that, Kingdom of Simeon, the province of Simeon, which was connected somehow or other to the northern section. Simeon also had offshoots further to the south and to the east, on the other side of the Jordan, as we find, as is mentioned in the Bible, 1 Chronicles 4:38 to 43, mentioning the migrations of Simeon to east of the Jordan before the exile by the Assyrians. We also find remains, archaeologists have found remains of an Israelite settlement in what is now northern Sinai, in the region that would have pertained to Sinai, in the region that would have pertained to Simeon. And these remains have included inscriptions mentioning Samaria. Samaria was one of the names of the northern kingdom, mentioning Samaria, and also artifacts characteristic of the northern kingdom, indicating that this settlement somehow or other was attached to the northern kingdom of Israel and not to Judah. Later, the 10 tribes were exiled, and Simeon seems to have been listed amongst the 10 exiled tribes. We hear that after the northern kingdom was exiled, Judah remained until it too was conquered by the Babylonians, but for a while Judah remained alone. And then there was King Josiah, one of the kings of Judah, and he conquered, or he occupied, one could say, part of the northern kingdom's lands that had been evacuated, that had been abandoned because the Assyrians had come down and destroyed everything in them and taken all of the peoples away. So King Josiah occupied part of the northern kingdom's uninhabited regions, and he went through the cities and he destroyed remains of temples and so on, of pagan altars that the northern kingdom had set up. We find this in 2 Chronicles 34. He also burned the bones of the priests on their altars, that is in the areas that he had occupied from the previous northern kingdom, and he cleansed Judah and Jerusalem. And so he did in the cities of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Simeon, as far as Naphtali, and all around with axes. And all around with axes, it says. This expression, all around with axes, in Hebrew is b'chavotehem, literally with their ruins, in their ruins. And that is to say that these areas were ruined, desolated, devastated, because the Assyrians had destroyed them. But the ruins remained, and he came around and he destroyed amongst the ruins anything that had some type of pagan association. Simeon was together with the cities of Manasseh and Ephraim and Naphtali. Simeon had been part of the 10 tribes who were taken away. So we look for Simeon amongst the 10 tribes. Even though some of them did remain with Judah, as we will see, most of them were taken away together with the 10 tribes. The 10 tribes moved to the north. Many of them moved almost straight away to the west. Others came later. For a while, a portion of them were remained. It was now southern Russia. Most of them moved west. Out of those who remained, emerged the Khazar nation, the nation of the Khuzars that converted to Judaism. The Khuzars had a tradition that they were descended from the tribe of Simeon, or Simeon and Manasseh, with some saying that Manasseh was the ruling elements amongst them, where Simeon was more the common people. Well, that is one remnant of Simeon that we found, and this remnant became the Khuzars that converted to Judaism, and this will return to Judah. But most of Simeon went to the west with the rest of the people, and that is where they are to be found. Jacob had prophesied concerning Simeon and Levi. See Genesis 49:7. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. That Simeon as well as Levi were to be scattered amongst the rest of the tribes. And as we find them, we find elements from Simeon amongst the 10 tribes in the west. We find Ptolemy mentions a Greek geographer, Ptolemy, in Roman times. In about 100 CE, mentions the Simeni on the east coast of Britain. Incidentally, Ptolemy, even though he lived or he worked in around the 100 CE, he used sources that were often 300 or 400 years old before him, older sources. And he mentions the Simeni on the east coast of Britain. And so to the Welsh, the people of Wales are called Simoni in Welsh and Irish literature. The first Fir Bolg, an important people in Irish mythology of the early settlers of Ireland. They were descended from Simeon, son of Israel, that is Simeon, son of Israel, or Simeon, son of Israel, at the least was one of their ancestors. Ptolemy also registers the Semneti, that is Simeon under the name of Simeon, in the province of Brit-Am in the west of France. And this area of Brittany had contacts with Wales and with Celtic Britain. In Celtic Britain, according to Ptolemy, we mentioned the Simeni were on the east coast. The Simeni were bordered by the Iduma River. Iduma is the name, Idumea, Edom. Another name for Edom. Edom in the land of Israel had bordered the territory of Simeon. So we have the Simoni and the Iduma River in this region of England, what's now England. And so too, bordering this region were the Iceni. Ptolemy mentions the Iceni. The Iceni were a famous tribe in ancient Britain. Boudicca, the queen who led a rebellion against the Roman occupiers, came from the Iceni tribe. Iceni have a name that in Phoenician Hebrew the same as Yachin, descendants of Yachin, one of the sons of Simeon. See Numbers 26:12. Also we find other elements from Simeon in Brittany, as we mentioned, and also among the Anglo-Saxon invaders of England, Semnones, and also find descendants of Simeon amongst the Lombards of northern Italy, and we find elements from Simeon in Belgium, in the Netherlands, and as we said in Wales. So Simeon got around, he was scattered amongst the other tribes, and we find elements from Simeon in many places, in several regions. As we said, Simeon was the second son of Jacob. Altogether Jacob had 12 sons. 11 of his sons were born in the land of Aram, whilst he was staying with his father-in-law, Laban, and his two main wives, Leah and Rachel. with daughters of Laban. And there is also an opinion that the maidservants of Rachel and Leah, Bilhah and Zilpah, were also daughters of Laban, but from wives of a lower rank. At all events, Jacob begat 11 of his sons whilst he was in that area, and then he decided to return to the land of Canaan. And he took his wives and his children, and they went and they travelled and they came to the land of Canaan, came to the area of Shechem, which is in the centre, the north centre, one could say, the north centre, in the area of Samaria. And the local prince of Shechem was named Hamor. Hamor means donkey in Hebrew, and the donkey is a noble animal. It did not always have the connotations of being someone who's not too bright. And Hamor was his name of the local prince, and he had a son named Shechem after the place they dwelt in. So we had Hamor, the king, and the prince named Shechem. And Shechem, the prince, he abducted Dinah. Dinah was the daughter of Jacob, and she was the sister of the brothers of the tribes of Israel. And Shechem abducted her, and he raped her, and he abused her, and he kept her with him, captive. And then Hamor, his father, went and requested of Jacob that they let them keep Dinah as a wife of Shechem, and that the family of Jacob dwell with them, live with them, and that they become one people, that they intermix and become one people. And the brothers replied, the brothers of Dinah, the sons of Jacob, replied that first the locals should circumcise themselves, since they were Hebrews and all the Hebrews get circumcised. In order to join up with the Hebrews, you have to get circumcised. And so Hamor went and he convinced his subjects to do as had been requested, in order that they may benefit from the wealth and the daughters in the entourage of Jacob. And whilst they were suffering from the after effects of the circumcision, two of the brothers, Simeon and Levi, went around and killed them all. It says in Genesis 34:25, "Now it came to pass on the third day, when they were in pain, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, the brothers of Dinah, each took his sword and came boldly upon the city and killed all the males. They killed Hamor and Shechem, his son, with the edge of the sword, and they took Dinah from Shechem's house, and they went out. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city, because their sister had been defiled." So we see Levi and Shimon playing the main part in this event, in this act of vengeance. It may sound somewhat questionable, but that's not for us to decide. It happened. It happened at that time. And we see here, as the sages noticed, that Simeon and Levi are referred to as Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers. Simeon and Levi, the brothers of Dinah. And out of all the brothers, they showed the most fraternal empathy, and they acted on it. They risked their lives to save their sister Dinah. And they are referred to as the brothers of Dinah, Simeon and Levi, the brothers of Dinah, because they acted like brothers. Nevertheless, Jacob, their father, Jacob, also known as Israel, he wasn't happy with the whole event. He wasn't happy with it at all. Genesis 34:30 says, "And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, 'You have troubled me. You upset me, disturbed me by making me obnoxious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And since I am few in number, they will gather themselves together against me and kill me. I shall be destroyed, my household and I.' But they said, 'Should he treat our sister like a harlot, like a common prostitute? Should we let him treat our sister like that?' That was the reply they gave to their father. And they had felt an obligation to defend the family honour, despite the chance that a very severe price may have to be paid for it. They were risking their lives, and it's risking the lives of everyone else to avenge the honor of their sister and to save her, to rescue her. So we have the attitude of doing everything possible to help a family member. Everything possible. Help a family member in need, even if they may suffer for it in the long run or in the short run, even at great risk to themselves. And here we see the attitude of honor, of self-respect, of righteousness, of doing the right thing, being according to, as I understood it, being placed very high in their scale of values. So this is an attitude, this is an attribute both of Simeon and Levi. And also we see here Simeon and Levi acting together as brothers. Referred to as the brothers of Dinah. They're acting as brothers. And when Jacob blessed the sons, he blessed them together. He says Simeon and Levi are brothers. They're referred to as brothers. Altogether there are 12 brothers, or if you are only referring to the sons of Leah, so there are 6 brothers. But Simeon and Levi was special, they had a special connection between them beyond that the other brothers had to themselves. They're referred to as brothers. And they acted together, and they gave expression to their brotherhood. And this seems to be a quality of Simeon. Later we find Simeon forming a special association with Judah, another brother, as extra bonding within the overall league of Israelite tribes when they came into the land after coming out of Egypt and conquer the land, and they received their tribal portions, and they had to conquer it and conquer the peoples living there and dispossess them and to come in and settle in place of them. We're told in the book of Joshua 19 verse 9, the inheritance of the children of Simeon was included in the share of the children of Judah. For the share of the children of Judah was too much for them. Therefore the children of Simeon had their inheritance with the inheritance of their people. And then again we find in Judges chapter 1 verse 1. Now after the death of Joshua came to pass that the children of Israel asked the Lord, saying, who shall be the first to go up for us against the Canaanites to fight against them? And the Lord says, Judah shall go up. Indeed I will deliver the land into his hand. So Judah said to Simeon his brother, come up with me to my allotted territory that we may fight against the Canaanites, and I'll likewise go with you to your allotted territory. And Simeon went with him. So here we see Simeon making a pact with his brother Judah, and previously made a pact with his brother Levi. So this seems to be a trait of Simeon, that if he's together with a group of people, he seeks to make some type of special connection with one or other of them, as additional insurance, one could say, to bond, to make an additional bonding with another individual. And this may be a psychological need that he has, or a strategy that he has adopted. So there's something else worth noting, that Simeon and Judah first they shared the same inheritance, and later Simeon moved out, distanced himself somewhat from Judah, and eventually he was exiled together with the 10 tribes. After the incident with Shechem, Jacob took his family, he moved away from Shechem, and he moved with his family near Ephrath by Bethlehem. Rachel, the mother of Joseph, gave birth. She gave birth to Benjamin, and she died in giving birth. Joseph and Jacob was left without her, without his favourite wife Rachel, and he had 2 sons from Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph became his favourite son. Joseph gave a bad, mistaken report about his brother to their fathers. The Bible says he brought a bad report about them, but the Dibat Tamara, the Hebrew there, indicates that the report was false. It was not true. Apparently Joseph made a mistake. He mistook their actions, and he thought they had done things that they hadn't really done. And not only did he misunderstand what was taking place, what had happened, but he went and told it to their father. The sages said that the things that he said about them were very severe. They could have been severely punished and possibly dispossessed or even faced the death penalty for these things. So this is a serious offence that Joseph inadvertently had committed. Nevertheless, Jacob treated Joseph as his favourite son, and he made a special coat of coloured stripes. This coat of coloured stripes indicated rank. It indicated that Joseph had a superior rank to the rest of his brothers. Also, Joseph had 2 dreams, indicating that he was destined to rule over all of his brothers and all of the family. And the brothers apparently feared that Joseph intended to dispossess them, or at least rule over them, take command of them. And indeed, Joseph had almost said it as such, even though he ascribed that to the dreams he had. But a person dreams what he thinks about. Usually what the dreams a person has are often connected to what he's thinking during the day. And his daytime fancies or aspirations come to expression in his dreams. So the brothers suspected that Joseph wanted to dispossess them because he had said that he was destined, according to these dreams, to rule over them, take charge of them. And therefore they decided to kill him. They decided to kill Joseph. And they proceeded to do so, to throw him in a pit. They were going to leave him to be devoured, the elements take care of him. The last minute, Judah just persuaded them not to do that. Not to do that, but to sell Joseph to a caravan of Ishmaelites going down to Egypt. Ishmaelites, the forefathers of the Arabs, they sold Joseph to them. Joseph was taken down to Egypt. In Egypt, he rose to become the virtual ruler of the country. And he saved Egypt, and he saved all the civilized world from famine. Because God had told him that a famine would come on the world, and especially on Egypt. And Joseph had prepared the country for it, so that when the famine came, there was food enough in Egypt for all of the people, and a surplus to sell to other countries round about. Meanwhile, in Canaan, they didn't have any food either. They were suffering from famine. So Jacob sent 10 of his sons. He had 11 sons left because Joseph had disappeared. He had been led to believe that Joseph had been killed by a wild beast, some type of animal. He killed Joseph. So therefore he kept Benjamin with him, but sent 10 of his sons to buy grain from Egypt. And they came to Egypt, and Joseph recognized them, but they did not know him. Joseph accused them of being spies. He gave them grain. He allowed them to return and take grain to their families and take the grain to Jacob, to Israel. But he kept Simeon with him, a surety that they returned. So the brothers took the grain. They took the grain to Jacob and to their families, and they were there, and then they ate it up, used it up. Yeah, people live. You have food, you need food, you eat it. And then the food is finished. There's no more food around. So they needed to come back to Egypt. And they had told Joseph that they had another son, that there was another son to the family, a younger son who was staying with their father. And Joseph had said that when they returned, they would have to bring this younger son, that is Benjamin, with them. And so they did. And they came back. They came back to Egypt. And when they came back, Joseph released Simeon. See Genesis 43:23. And after that, Joseph was reconciled to his brothers. Now, it has been suggested that Simeon was the one who proposed killing Joseph before it was decided to sell him to the Ishmaelites. We saw that Joseph had been suspected of trying to displace the brothers, had been decided to kill him, and they had proceeded to go ahead with that. And it seems that Simeon was the one who had initiated this plot to do away with Joseph. The logic of this thing goes something like this. Actually, it's quite logical, stands to reason. First of all, we are told that when the brothers threw Joseph in the pit. Reuben went away and he intended to come back and take Joseph out of the pit. So it could not have been Reuben, because Reuben wanted to save Joseph. And it was unlikely to have been Judah, because Judah later, at the last minute, said, let us not kill him, but sell him. And also could not have been any of the sons of Bilhah or Zilpah of the handmaidens, since we see previously that Joseph had minded the flocks with them, and presumably he would have been on friendly terms with them. See Genesis 37:2. And also Benjamin at the time was young, and he was tending his father, and Joseph was his full brother, both from the same mother, and they were quite close, and it would not have been Benjamin. So this leaves only Simeon, Levi, Issachar, and Zebulun. And there were other reasons excluding all of the others apart from Simeon. Simeon, together with his brother Levi, had already wiped out the whole city of Shechem, so they had a track record of resorting to extreme measures. And they were later condemned. Both Simeon and Levi were condemned by their father for intending to uproot a bull. It's translated as hamstrung an ox, or something similar, but actually it says to uproot a bull. And the bull is a symbol of Joseph, represents Joseph. See Deuteronomy 33:17. So this apparently refers to their intention to do away with Joseph. And Levi is excluded for other reasons, so that leaves only Simeon. There's a midrash discussing this matter in more depth. So this indicates that Simeon had indeed initiated this plot to do away with Joseph. Simeon was more extreme than his brothers. He was more prone to violent measures. He had a strong tendency for self-preservation, also for initiating things of this nature. And he was also sensitive to the needs of social hierarchy, of the way things should be according to birth. And Joseph had been disturbing the accepted conception of how things should be, and Simeon would have resented it. Also, Simeon, along with his brothers, would have felt endangered by Joseph. So therefore they took this drastic step. And Jacob prophesied concerning Simeon and Levi. He said in Genesis 49, Simeon and Levi are brothers, instruments of cruelty are in their dwelling place. Let not my soul enter their council. Let not my honor be united in their assembly. For in their anger they slew a man, in their self-will they hamstrung an ox. In other words, say, as we explained, plotted to uproot the bull, meaning Joseph. Cursed be the anger, for it is fierce, and the wrath, that is the anger, and wrath is another word for anger, and the wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. It was prophesied that they would be scattered throughout the rest of Israel. He also says, he said, Simeon and Levi are brothers. We mentioned the fact this aspect of brothers associated with Simeon. And also instruments of cruelty are in their dwelling place. Instruments of cruelty are in their dwelling place. That is how it's translated. In Hebrew, Klei Hamas Mechoratehem. In Hebrew, this may be more exactly translated as saying, tools of violence are their means of livelihood. Tools of violence are their means of livelihood. That means to make a living out of violence, out of using the strength of their arms to do whatever has to be done. And we find descendants of Simeon amongst the Irish who became dominant in the USA as policemen, as law enforcers, and also as lawyers. And the Irish included not only people from Simeon, but also from Asher, and the tribe of Asher, and from the tribe of Dan. Dan is also associated with the law and with lawyers. And so we have the lawyers and the policemen together amongst the Irish, and they indeed were very prominent in the USA in these professions and professions associated with these matters. We also saw We saw that Simeon, to a degree, was supreme not only amongst the 10 tribes, but also amongst the Jews of Judah. And one opinion says that Simeon, among the Jews of Judah, comprised the teachers of children, the scribes, and indigent poor who wander around. See Midrash Breshet Rabbah 88:10. Also Genesis, Rashi on Genesis, the commentator Rashi on Genesis 49:7 says, as we said, Simeon amongst the Jews comprised teachers of little children, teachers of children, scribes, people who write on sacred scrolls, Torah scrolls, mezuzahs, and things that have to be written in a certain way. It's quite a difficult profession. I once worked at it. It's a very demanding profession. It's quite difficult. And as I can testify, it's not a simple thing to do. It needs certain qualities of certain characteristics, certain qualities of personality that I lacked, but I did it because I had to. And I appreciate the work that was done. So it says that Simeon are often involved in this profession, that was the teachers of little children. And in other cases, the indigent and poor, that is fundraisers, people who go around begging or raising money, or raising funds, which is, in its own way, is a respectable profession. And this is what Simeon would be involved in. It also indicates musical appreciation, because in biblical times, in times of the sages, teaching little children meant teaching them to chant biblical passages, to learn them off by heart, to inculcate a feeling for the rhythm, for the music, and also this leads to certain advantages and mathematical instincts, and so this is what they would have been gifted with. So let us now take what we have spoken of and put it all together and see if we can make some type of composite picture of what Simeon was, or may have been, and we can learn something. We should not take this too seriously, but we should take it, at the same time, treat it with some respect. It is a possibility. The traits of Simeon are universal traits. Everyone has something of these qualities within him, but some more than others, and some people it is more emphasized than others. So that is what we have to look for. And Simeon may have traditional conservative values. It's a possible chip on his shoulder, resentment, inborn resentment. Some people have it, as if he's not getting what he deserves, as if something wrong, as if he feels in advance he's going to be cheated or treated unfairly. And in addition to this, along with this, he has a spiritual inclination. It's not all bad feeling. It can also be quite deep and quite spiritual and sensitive. He also has a sense of loyalty to his family and his friends. He would risk his life for them. He is brave and may be violent and impulsive. He is socially conservative and prefers matters to be conducted in an accepted way. But the possibility of revolution is not strange to him if the government or those in power are not acting as they should be, and so he's prepared to take extreme measures to rectify the situation. He may prefer working as a teacher, an instructor, a counsellor, a policeman, a legal worker, or a bureaucrat. It's quite a wide description. It encompasses a great number of professions, in one way or other. Nevertheless, you could say this applies to nearly everyone at some time or at some stage or other. Many of us have worked at several jobs in our lives, had several different professions, and at one time or other we could have had one of these described occupations. Nevertheless, it's a question of emphasis, of preliminary preferment. And Simeon has this. He is inclined in this direction, to teach people, to guide them, to counsel them, or to officiate over them, to be a bureaucrat, to be a policeman, tell them what to do, make sure they don't do what they should not do, make sure that no one does what they should not do, and get paid for it. And this is something that Simeon has. We should also some negative points, possible negative points. Rabbi Fishel Ma'el wrote an important book in Hebrew, unfortunately not yet in English. Rabbi Fishel Ma'el, he's an authority on the tribes, according to the sages, according to different accounts. And he mentions to this claim that Simeon tended to intermix with non-Israelite elements. And he also has a weaknesses of his own, leading to idolatry and promiscuity. So this too should be worth noting. It should not be overemphasized. A friend of ours, also a scholar, Dr. Clifford Smith with a Y, S-M-Y-T-H, Dr. Clifford Smith of Belfast in Ulster. So he's a scholar, also his sons are scholars, and he is a leading British Israel personality. And he once came across sources such as those we were quoted indicating that Simeon was responsible for selling Joseph, and he gave a talk on it. And he wanted to say that Joseph represented the British, because indeed Joseph gave rise to the British and the Americans. The British Joseph was divided into two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim was dominant amongst the British, Manasseh amongst the Americans. So where in Ulster, Northern Ireland, there was a struggle, there was a conflict between the Catholics pertaining more to Southern Ireland originally, and the Protestants pertaining to that area and also pertaining more to England and to Scotland. But having been in the same area for hundreds of years, and there was a conflict, almost a civil war between them. And also the Irish who wanted to independence from England, they used terrorist tactics, and they have a bad reputation in that sense. So he wanted to say that Simeon had been prominent amongst the Irish, and Joseph amongst the British, and therefore the antipathy, the antagonism between the two, of Simeon to Joseph, was repeating itself in the actions of the Southern Irish, or descendants of the Southern Irish, or those who identify the Southern Irish, against Joseph, who was represented by the British, and descendants of the British, or those who identified with the British. So this is a possibility worth considering. It is not the whole story, nothing really is, but whatever. We ourselves, I myself, are partly, apparently through my father, descended from Irishmen, and I grew up with Irishmen, and on the whole, it was okay. It was quite, they treated me well, treated me better than others did, and I owe them something. And they have a nobility, they have an innate nobility, and they have this attribute of helping others, or also helping others who others would not help. And actually this makes them good policemen, makes them good teachers. They look for the weak or the stumbling personage in their, those who with whom they have charge, and they help him. So this too could be an attribute, a positive attribute that Simeon has, but it's not entirely pertinent, because even though Simeon is quite important amongst the Southern Irish, it appears to the tribes of Asher and of Dan, and even offshoots of Joseph are also important in and possibly more than Simeon is. At all events, so this is what we have. This is a reality worth considering, and helping us understand more of what is going on. May the Lord God of Israel bless you. Thank you.